What are paradox forms? At face value, we're led to believe that they are forms of Pokemon from the distant past and future. But what if I told you that they're not actually Pokemon from our past or future at all? Now, before we can unravel what paradox forms are, we need to take a quick look at that word paradox and what exactly it means in the context of paradox forms. According to Oxford Languages and Google, a paradox is a statement or proposition that, despite sound or apparently sound reasoning from acceptable premises, leads to a conclusion that seems senseless, logically unacceptable, or self-contradictory. It is a situation, person, or thing that combines contradictory features or qualities. With that in mind, that means paradox forms are Pokemon that on the surface should reasonably have existed or will exist, but are in some way contradictory to the Pokemon world's timeline. But why is that? We've seen Pokemon from ancient prehistoric times be brought back to life in the form of Fossilmons, and we've also seen man-made Pokemon created via bio and mechanical engineering. So what makes the prehistoric paradox forms of the past and the cybernetic paradox forms of the future so contradictory? Well, I believe it is because the paradox forms are not from the regular timeline of the Pokemon world. Instead, they are from an altered timeline created as a result of someone or something messing with time. So now that we have an idea of what makes paradox forms so paradoxical, let's go back to that word paradox one last time. Paradoxes in time traveling occur when someone or something travels through time and does something contradictory to the regular flow of time. The simplest and most common example of a temporal paradox portrayed in media is known as the grandfather paradox. This is where a character travels back in time to prevent their existence by unaliving their grandparent. This creates a paradox because that means our time traveler will never come to exist, which means they couldn't have traveled back in time in the first place to unplug their good old grandpappy from the Matrix, thus resulting in them being born, allowing them to travel back in time to create a causal loop. Now, in the story of Pokemon Scarlet and Violet, there is only one confirmed time traveler that we know of at this point. This would be Professor Sada in Scarlet or Professor Churro in Violet, or at least the AI versions of them. And I believe it's these professors' journey through time that created the paradox forms in the first place. But wait, I'm sure you're thinking, how could the professors time traveling create the paradox forms if Heath, the author of the Scarlet and Violet book, recorded seeing paradox forms in the Great Crater 200 years before the time machine was ever even built? And to that, I would say that the professors created their own causal loop, also known as a bootstrap paradox. In a bootstrap paradox, event A causes event B, which then leads back to causing event A, creating a causal loop where both events simultaneously cause the other event to happen, which then makes it impossible to discern which event truly happened in the first place. So in the case of the professors, Heath, and the time machine, I believe Heath's phantom memory in the Great Crater, which leads to him talking to an unknown individual and then waking up with a schematic to some sort of device, was in fact the human professor traveling through time. And this, in and of itself, actually creates another type of paradox known as an object loop paradox, but more specifically, an object information loop paradox, which is when someone travels back in time to give somebody else knowledge that they shouldn't have in their time period, allowing that person with the new knowledge to create a device that shouldn't have been invented in their time period. This creates a paradox for obvious reasons. Now, the professor could have done this out of admiration for Heath, as they're clearly fans of his work and would have loved to meet him in person, or they could have gone back in time to intentionally give Heath the schematics for some other arbitrary reason. Remember, these are the living human professors we're still talking about here, and as far as we know, their motivations seem to be slightly more selfish and sinister than the AI professors they go on to create. Now, at this point in our theory, the human professors have created one bootstrap paradox by using the time machine to go back in time and give Heath the schematics to the machine, thus allowing them to use the schematics in the future to create the time machine in the first place. Now, I believe the professors meddling in time creating these paradoxes splinter the Pokemon world's timeline, creating branching timelines both retroactively and proactively. Basically, they have moved and removed the Infinity Stones around, causing some level of instability in the regular flow of time. This creates parallel timelines that are similar in some ways, but could be drastically different in others. And it is from these fractured timelines that I believe the paradox Pokemon actually come from. In these timelines, maybe humans never existed, allowing Pokemon to become even more feral and wild, creating the past paradox forms. In the real world, humans have manipulated and influenced animals around us for centuries, resulting in new breeds of animals or changing their habits altogether. And it is possible that this same phenomena occurs in the Pokemon world, so removing humans altogether may have drastic effects on the Pokemon. And then as for the future paradox forms, it's likely they come from a timeline where Pokemon have either gone extinct en masse or were never really in existence in the first place, which may result in the humans of this timeline creating their own cybernetic Pokemon to either replace the ones that have gone extinct, or maybe to fill a void that natural born Pokemon have left in their world for whatever reason. Now as for that single Great Tusk or Iron Treads that Heath sees on his expedition into the crater about 200 years ago, that could have easily been sent through time by the human professor while toying with the time machine. They may have been running tests and accidentally sent a number of paradox forms into Heath's time, or they may have done it intentionally to further manipulate Heath into creating the Scarlet and Violet books to ensure that the events of the Scarlet and Violet games take place the way that they intended them to. And there's also a possibility, now knowing about Terrapagos, that the Great Crater itself inherently has time-space warping properties, and that the time machine is more of a focusing device that uses the already present properties of the Great Crater to hone in on specific things and times. But that is a video for another time. No pun intended. And so yeah, that is my working theory on paradox forms as of right now, folks. There may be some minor plot holes in here, but let's be honest, Pokemon doesn't always come up with the most logically sound plot devices to begin with. I'm pretty sure if we get DLC's editor note, this part was actually written and recorded well before the DLC announcement, so just kind of disregard the if we get DLC. We already got DLC. This was a little bit of a, this video took longer to get out. Anyways, back to past me. Diving into the explanation of the Great Crater and paradox forms is going to make even less sense than anything I've said over the last 6 or 7 minutes. So with that, I'm gonna get off of this one, but I invite you all to discuss down below in the comments and let me know some of your theories on paradox forms and the Great Crater. And until next time, I'll catch y'all later.